I'm Mary Aline. I'm a certified fertility awareness educator. And how I came to this work actually really aligns with the topic we're going to talk about, which is hormonal birth control. Because I was on hormonal birth control from the time I was 17 to 25, about. And I did mostly the pill, and I did like all the pills. I stopped birth control for a time, and I was getting really into my body, my health. I was like at a spiritual awakening point too. And so I just started questioning what I was putting into my body on all different levels. And so I decided to stop hormonal birth control for a brief time. And then I needed it again. So I started it up again. And from that like period, I really felt the shift in my emotional body and how the pill was impacting my moods. And I was having like wild mood swings, and most of them were directed towards my partner at the time, which is unfortunate. And if he's listening, I'm sorry. um, so I remember clearly I was in the bathroom and I was like looking down at my pills, and it just was like an aha moment. Like I was like, "Oh, this is what's affecting my mood. This is why I feel so unstable." And so after that, I stopped taking the pill, but I just didn't know what else to do. And that led me down a lot of different roads, and I ended up having an unplanned pregnancy because I wasn't using any form of birth control or contraception. And after I decided to go through a pregnancy release, I realized that I really needed to understand my body in like a much deeper way. And so that's what brought me to fertility awareness, and learning how to track my cycle naturally for birth control was just like a huge moment in my life where I finally felt like that I could trust my body again, especially like after going through a pregnancy release and feeling like I couldn't trust my body because of my own story around using hormonal birth control. I think I've just naturally been inclined to teach people about of using this as a natural form of birth control and support people and just understanding what their options are, because I'm definitely not against hormonal birth control. I think that people deserve to just be informed about what their choices are, because I realized when I was 17 I wasn't really informed in the way that maybe I would have made a different decision, maybe not. As a 17-year-old, like the pill was like very helpful for me in my early 20s.
I look to you as such a guide in this on this topic, just because not only are you have a personal relationship to hormonal birth control and it's such a journey with it, and also you're so scientifically informed and literate on this issue. So I can't wait to talk to you about this. This is actually my first, it leads quite well into the first question, which you've touched about through your own personal lens a little bit, but how does hormonal birth control impact the menstrual cycle and fertility? And I'm sort of pulling at the thread here, but also perhaps your emotional life and these other kind of symptoms that we might see show up.
Yeah, this is a great question, and I might get a little bit sciencey here, so hang in there with
Love
me.
it.
But I think what's frustrating is that most of the information around how hormonal birth control works is about the effects of it. So it stops ovulation, it increases the texture, the thickness of our cervical fluid, it decreases the uterine lining. And so that's very widely accessible online. People can easily search that. But what's challenging is that like the mechanism of how it actually works is where it's harder to get those details. And so in order to understand how hormonal birth control works, we also need to understand a little bit about the natural menstrual cycle and fertility and how that works. And so, under normal circumstances, without any sort of synthetic hormones in our body, our brain is communicating to our ovaries. And so the hypothalamus, which is a endocrine gland that's deep in our brain, communicates to our pituitary gland to release different hormones that then communicate to our ovaries. And so we have this sort of negative and positive feedback communication from our ovaries to our pituitary gland to our to our hypothalamus. And so the the hypothalamus is the gland, the master gland. I like to think of her as the queen who's ruling over everything. She's what notices that a new cycle needs to start and will tell the pituitary gland to start releasing certain hormones to develop follicles that are housing our egg, which is released at the point of ovulation. And when that communication between the hypothalamus and the ovaries and the pituitary is altered, it alters our natural menstrual cycle. And all hormonal birth controls work by secreting synthetic estrogens and synthetic progesterones, which is also known as a progestin. So those are the two synthetic hormones that are in all of our hormonal birth control. Some hormonal birth control only has synthetic progesterone, also called progestin, and others have a combination of estrogen and progesterone. And what these hormones do is they disrupt our endocrine system. They disrupt that communication system. And so essentially with the secretion of these, when you take the pill, when you get the shot, if you're using the patch, if you're using the ring, if you have an IUD, your hypothalamus thinks that ovulation has already happened, or that it doesn't need to occur. So the pituitary gland doesn't secrete the same hormones that would start the progression of a natural cycle to happen, and then the certain levels don't activate ovulation to occur. So in essence, the synthetic hormones are mimicking a certain part of our natural cycle that's telling the brain that we don't need to ovulate.
By stopping ovulation, so you're not getting those naturally occurring hormones. You're getting sort of at a space. We're in a space of kind of arrested development. Basically, we're kind of just like stuck in this sort of liminal space, hormonally speaking.
Correct. And what's interesting is that not all hormonal birth controls actually suppress ovulation. And I think that's also can be even more confusing for people because they think that oh, well, sometimes I'm ovulating, which is, I think, great. Sometimes, like having some ovulation, I think is better than no ovulation because that the natural ways that our cycle is meant to work is to have certain levels of estrogen, and then that triggers ovulation, which after ovulation, the only way we can get access to progesterone is through ovulation. And progesterone is like the unsung hero of hormones. It's so good for our mood, it's great for our sleep, it's great for our bones. I mean, it's just it's a really important hormone for our longevity and for our health. And the synthetic version of it is not the same.
So, which forms of hormonal birth control suppress ovulation and which don't? And so, if somebody, because I've heard from a range of people who are on the pill and they've been on the same pill for years and years, but also people who are on hormonal IUDs, and they seem to have not just different symptoms, but different concerns and priorities as well.
Mhm. Yeah, so the Any form of hormonal birth control that only has progestin in it is more likely to not consistently stop ovulation. And the main ones being the mini pill. So some people, it's definitely less effective at preventing ovulation. The main way that the mini pill works is to change the texture of the cervical fluid, so sperm can't physically access the uterus and an egg, and also to thin the lining of our uterus so implantation of an egg can't happen. So the mini pill is one form where you could still be ovulating, and I've even had some people tell me that they see estrogenic cervical fluid, which makes me a little nervous, right? Like if you're ovulating and you're still seeing estrogenic cervical fluid, then I'm not sure how effective the that it is in that situation specifically.
Mhm.
Uh, and the other piece is that IUDs also have been known to not consistently prevent ovulation from happening. So, for example, the Mirena IUD, which is an IUD that can be kept in place for up to 8 years. It's one of the longer hormonal IUD options. In like 1 year study, approximately 45% of menstrual cycles were ovulatory. And in another study, after 4 years, 75% of cycles were ovulatory. So the main way that the IUDs are preventing pregnancy is again that thickening of the cervical fluid and the thinning of the endometrial lining. It also depends on what generation progestin that you receive. So there's different generations that of progestin that was made in the lab, essentially. So you have your first generation, which tends to be more in the implant and the shot. And then you have your third generation, and the fourth generation tends to be more found in the mini pill. And so the first generation progestins in the shot and the implant, you're also getting a higher dosage of progestin. So with these options, it's more likely that they're actually suppressing ovulation compared to the mini pill or the IUD. And then you have your hormonal birth controls that have synthetic estrogen included in along with progestin, and that's going to be your combination pill or like just the pill. Um, and you also have some different options within the combination pill. You can get lower doses of hormones throughout, like more steady. It's called monophasic. It's more steadily released throughout the cycle. So you have 3 weeks of more steady levels of hormones, and then you have a week of your withdrawal bleed. And then you have a triphasic option, which is more similar to our natural cycle, where there's actually 3 phases of different hormones, again, throughout the 3 weeks. And then you have a week of the placebo pills. And that the patch and the ring also have both estrogen and progestin. And these are the options that you have a withdrawal bleed in. And so estrogen, the synthetic estrogen, helps with the lining of the uterus actually growing, so you can have what's called a withdrawal bleed. It's not a true period.
I think this is so crucial. Clarifying the difference between a true bleed and a withdrawal bleed is kind of fundamental to understanding part of what, at least part of what is happening to your body on birth control.
The withdrawal bleed is is really interesting because
Yes.
it was created pretty much for marketing purposes, um, which you don't really think about. At least I don't really think about the marketing piece of the pharmaceutical company, but like, duh, of course, that's a big part of how we're getting users to take this medication. In the 1960s, people used their period, as a marker of health, and they also used it as a marker to indicate they weren't pregnant. And so the inclusion of a withdrawal bleed in the whole design of hormonal birth control was really more for that social acceptance rather than like a medical reason or necessity to bleed each month. And the the withdrawal bleed is not based on ovulation, which is what a true period is based on. It's not based on the decrease in progesterone that happens in your natural cycle. The withdrawal bleed is when you're taking the synthetic hormones over those 3 weeks, and then you have that placebo pill, and it's the stop of those synthetic hormones that causes the lining to be shed, but you don't medically need that. That it doesn't matter whether or not you're having that withdrawal bleed or not for your body, because it's sort of scientifically created. It doesn't really indicate anything or mean anything. So that's like a huge misconception when I was young, I had no idea. I was like, "Oh, this is my period," right? But it's not a true period. It's just sort of an aftermath of the synthetic hormones, and that's why there was an addition of estrogen into the hormonal birth control to make that bleeding actually look like a real bleed, because without that synthetic estrogen, the lining never really builds enough to look like a real period.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. The wow, just a withdrawal bleed as a mark as sort of something to be marketed is such a kind of, yeah, very eye-opening. But and speaking of myths and common misconceptions, there are so many. You just spoke about one, which is that you're having a period just because you're having some kind of blood appear during while you're on hormonal birth control. But I would love to hear about some other myths that you've heard, either in your line of work or your research, of which there are many.
One of them being, and I'm sure many of us have heard this, is that hormonal birth control regulates your cycle, or it treats different aspects of your cycle that are have been challenging. So it can hormonal birth control can certainly help with symptoms, especially people that have endometriosis and have a lot of pain and irregular bleeding and heavy bleeding throughout their cycle. So it can absolutely help with different symptoms, but it doesn't cure these symptoms or really get at the root cause of what's causing some of these um, different um, symptoms of your cycle, like for example, like PCOS or having irregular cycles or having a lot of heavy bleeding. It doesn't really address why that's occurring, but it can help with the symptoms. So I think that's one of the first misconceptions that I like to talk about with people, because a lot of people when they're coming off of hormonal birth control really are concerned that these symptoms are going to return, and it's a very valid concern, because the the time that they were on hormonal birth control isn't actually getting at the root cause of why some of these symptoms were occurring. So it is potential for the symptoms to return after you stop hormonal birth control. And again, I'm a proponent for the use of hormonal birth control with informed consent, and know that it has really can really change people's lives, especially people with endometriosis that really couldn't have quality of life without access to this sort of medical intervention. Another misconception is that the low dose options, like the mini pill, are somehow better for you than the higher doses. And it could be true for you and your body. Like the mini pill could be better for you, but the action and the mechanism is still the same. You're still taking synthetic hormones, you're still altering your endocrine system, you're still potentially suppressing ovulation and therefore not getting the natural benefits of these other hormones like real progesterone. So I think I hear that a lot with people who are like, "Oh, well, I'm on the pill, but don't
Doesn't
worry,
count.
I'm on a lower dose of it." And I'm like, "Great. Like that's great." And also it still is having an impact on your endocrine system. And as long as you know that and are aware of that, then that's great. But I think that there's a really big misconception that you're still having a natural cycle on the low dosage, and um that's not consistently accurate.
Wow. Okay. So withdrawal bleeds we've discussed, low dosage myths. Is there anything else? Any other myths? Any last ones?
Um so I think on okay, yeah, there's one more
Okay.
that I'll briefly touch on, and that's that people on both ends of the spectrum, they're worried that their cycles are never going to return and they're going to be infertile. So, people that have I think a lot of people in our generation may have the history of, like, being on 10 years or longer of birth control, not even remembering what their period was like when they first started bleeding. And, that I feel that's a common thread, it's a common story for people in our age range. And I hear a lot of fears around my cycles are never gonna return. I'm, like, so scared I'm infertile. Like, what if I can't get pregnant? And there is valid reasons for that concern, and I always like to remind people that our bodies are so resilient. Like, this is what our bodies were made to do, which is reproduce, even if you don't wanna reproduce, but, like, that's what they're made to do, and they want to get back into that state and into that rhythm. Now, it may take time, but our bodies are just really resilient. The other side of that is that people expect their cycles to return immediately after they stop, and,
Well,
we'll
how
talk.
long oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So the next question you sort of segueing so perfectly into is which is about how long does it take actually for the cycle to return?
Yeah, that's, the million-dollar question I think that we all have, and you're probably not gonna like my answer, but it really depends. It really depends on a lot of different factors, including the length of use, how long you've been on hormonal birth control, the type of hormonal birth control you've been on. There's some known, including the Depo-Provera shot, that it takes much longer for our natural cycles to return. The age when you started, so that's really important. If you started when you were really young and your endocrine system never really had a time to develop that rhythm, that communication with the brain and the ovaries, that might impact how long it takes your cycles to come back, and your health prior to hormonal birth control usage. So, if you were using hormonal birth control to help with any of those irregular cycles, heavy bleeding, things like that. So, what was happening prior to usage, and then also your current state of health. So, all of those factors influence when your cycles are going to return. But in general, you can expect them to normalize within 3 to 10 months. And if it takes longer than that, or if you're noticing that you're having other symptoms come up, other symptoms related to your health and that are affecting your cycle, then that's a time when I wouldn't recommend to wait that up until 10 months to get support from a practitioner or from a fertility awareness educator.
What are the most common symptoms that people experience in this time of coming off, and maybe they're still waiting for their cycle to return, but are there other symptoms they might experience?
Yeah, there's definitely some common threads, including irregular cycles, anovulation, irregular bleeding, especially with the shot. There could be long periods of bleeding. And then there's some ones that can be positive on the positive side and also affect people on, maybe not so positive. So the you could experience some more mood swings, which if people were feeling, like, depressed or flat, like, just flat, like, not really having a lot of joy in life, having some mood swings and, like, having some emotional experiences might feel really good, like, "Wow, I'm, like, experiencing the world in a different way." And for people that maybe have a more inclined to have mental health issues or mental health needs, having those mood swings might be a little bit scary. So I would say if you are coming off of hormonal birth control, I always recommend people to do it in a time of their life if they have the choice where there's not like so many other things going on. So, not a lot of other stressors. So, you can really sense when you might need to access additional mental health support. There's also fatigue or feeling more energized. So, again, on both sides of the spectrum, uh, you might notice some digestive issues. But what's positive for most everybody is a increase or a change in libido. Sometimes that sexual desire comes back on after we're off hormonal birth control.
Wow. It's, there's a lot. It sounds like there's a lot of it's a wide spectrum of experience, so people have to kind of be in a place where they sort of have the bandwidth to field a wide range of options. I've had, some friends and clients say to me that actually, they said, "Well, I got on the pill when I was younger, but now I feel so much more resourced and so much more capable to field whatever might come up. Like, I went on for this really intense symptom, and now I actually feel capable of sort of facing it and looking to other tools to support it." So,
I think I went through a big state of grief when I initially came off hormonal birth control because I was like, well, like, who am I? Like, what is my personality? Because I started when I was young and like in like deep teen angst vibes. And so I'm like, was that synthetic hormones? Was that just me? Was that, I had this whole cycle of grief around this sort of loss of like my personality at that age, which I didn't wasn't expecting. And I had the opposite effect where like hormonal birth control sort of put me into more intense mood swings. So when I got off of it, I felt more like myself. But yeah, I think about that of like when we put teens on it so young, just how that could be impacting their relationships in other ways.
yeah, especially at a time when, as you said, think systems are still developing. They're sort of, we're just beginning to establish these rhythms that are going to be with us for the rest of our lives. So, absolutely. So, what tools or methods do you suggest? Definitely seeing a fertility awareness educator always helps. But in this process of coming back to your cycle, sort of restoring regular ovulation, I know it's a multi system support. You kind of want to come at
Yeah.
it from many different angles. I'd love to hear what you recommend what you did as well.
Yeah, I think well, I didn't do anything. So I don't recommend what I what I did. Because I didn't have these resources back back in the day. So, I think one of the most important things that you can do is track your symptoms because and regardless of whether or not you're tracking your like you're tracking for fertility awareness, just tracking your symptoms so that you can have actual data to either access the support that you need from the medical field or help you understand if your symptoms are getting better, if they're getting worse, and it takes some of that guessing game out of it. So that's the first thing is just having awareness of what your symptoms are and how they're impacting you. A lot of the other pieces are simple, but like so profound and hard. They're, like, easy. It's like lifestyle. Lifestyle recommendations are so easy, but in practice are, like, so hard. So, it's just nourishing your body, some forms of contraception can deplete some of your nutrients. So, I'm not a doctor, but I do tend to recommend some general supplements for people that have been on long term hormonal birth control. And you can even start these supplements while you're still on hormonal birth control to help with some of the nutrients and minerals that are known to be depleted. So just like a general good quality multivitamin can like be super helpful. Um, the other piece, I mean, again, they're simple. High quality sleep, great hydration, movement, lowering your toxic load, so decreasing the chemicals in your environment, and supporting your detox pathways. So, like having a daily bowel movement, um, sweating, again, drinking a lot of water so you have enough hydration to sweat. Again, simple, but can be very challenging to implement. And then also considering some supportive therapies, so like pelvic massage, bringing a lot of circulation to the pelvis, bringing a lot of blood flow to the pelvis. So you can do that through massage, you can do that through orgasm, self pleasure. Acupuncture is another great modality that, if you have the resources to access post hormonal birth control, can be really supportive. Managing stress, again, simple, but
Simple and so
so
complex.
hard. And then my last two pieces are around just connecting with other rhythms. And mostly for me, what that looks like is connecting to seasonal rhythms, connecting to the lunar cycle, um, putting your feet on the ground, getting outside, getting in sunlight, and developing a relationship with your womb and your ovaries, or with your uterus and your ovaries. uh, the hormonal birth control energetically can just cut us off from that natural cycle. Post hormonal birth control, I think there is a need for that reconnection to happen. So that could be guided visualizations, that could just be like having time and space with your hands on your uterus and on your lower abdomen. And just again, one of my favorite Taoist teachers, Montauk Chia, talks about smiling and thanking all of our organs and just thanking them for just like showing up and like doing their like natural organ thing. And I think that can be, if you're into more of the energetic, spiritual nature of life, that can also be a great way to just reconnect to this part of your body that hasn't been um, it hasn't been naturally cycling.
I love the meditation. Mary just released a meditation on her website that is a womb meditation that's very beautiful. So would suggest that, checking that out as a starting place. If someone comes to you and they say they want to get off hormonal birth control, but they're not sure of what are there other contraceptive options? They sort of that's sort of all that's been their mainstream experience of it's the pill or nothing. What would you tell that person?
Your doctor wants you to have the most effective birth control. Like, that's what they care most about, which totally makes sense. Yes, like, I want everybody to have effective birth control. And there can be different values and reasons why somebody would not want like the most effective option
Right.
available.
Yeah.
So that would like lead me into questions like, what do you need in your birth control? Do you have any specific values related to contraception that you want to follow? Also, like, what sort of access do you have? Like, do you have access to barrier methods? How often can you access them? Do you need STI protection? And another one is, do you have support from your partner or partners? So there's many non-hormonal options that are effective and allow for your natural cycle to unfold. So that could be condoms, cycle tracking, obviously for fertility awareness methods, pH gels like Phexxi is becoming more popular, and that's like it maintains the pH of the vaginal canal to be more acidic, which doesn't allow for sperm to survive. So that's currently on the market in the US. You do need a prescription for that. There's the copper IUD, which could be a whole nother podcast on. And then there's other barrier methods like diaphragm, cervical caps, and sponges. However, all of these barrier methods require spermicide, and spermicides can have a lot of toxic chemicals in them, so that's something to consider. There is a more natural spermicide called Contragel, but it's not regularly sold in the US and it can be a little bit more expensive to use. So those are some other options, but I think before someone makes a choice, I think it's important to talk through some of the questions in the beginning that I mentioned.
I think that's what's so amazing about becoming a bit more cycle conscious or just sort of waking up this part of our intuition and kind of our, I don't know, autonomy is just that we do have options, that it's not a one size fits all. A lot that I
Mhm.
hear reflected from folks is that, it's the pill is for everything. It's kind of just a one size fits all. That's it. But actually, in this area of our lives, maybe we want a little more informed consent and a little more spacious, complexity and
Totally.
choices. I
Yeah,
think, yeah, absolutely.
absolutely.
Okay, well, my last question is what I ask everyone at the end, which is what is the most nourishing part of your work?
I think what's most nourishing is when I witness somebody coming back into a trusting relationship with their body. I think there's so many reasons why we don't trust our body. And through my work as a fertility awareness educator, like in essence, that's what we're doing is we're teaching people about their bodies so that they can come into deeper relationship with them and find a deeper trust in their bodies. That moment of like reclamation is just really beautiful to witness and is the most nourishing part of this work for me.
Mary, you're amazing. I'm so inspired by you and everything you do for the fertility awareness community. I think you're just brilliant. Thank you for doing this. Will you tell everyone where to find you and how to contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I have a freebie out, and it's about what to expect when coming off of hormonal birth control. So I think you'll be able to find that link in the show notes. What I'm here to do is just provide a non-judgmental space for us to learn about our bodies. So, yeah, I hope to talk with some of you all.
Thank you, Mary.